It is an honor and a pleasure to have all of you here this evening, in general because you brave the cold, and in particular because we have a wonderful program for you this evening. It is an honor to welcome the speaker that we have from the Hartman Institute. I should probably not just assume everyone knows who I am. My name's Rabbi Daniel Weiner. I'm one of the rabbis here at Temple to Hirsch Sinai. And on behalf of the board, staff, and community of Temple to Hirsch Sinai, it is our honor and pleasure to welcome you here into our congregation, and particularly for this program. We hope this will not be the last time, but if it's your first, the first of many times. In particular, I very much resonate with welcoming programs from the Hartman Institute into our community. We've been very, very fortunate over the last few years to have a number of them. Most recently, we've had Daniel Hartman here as a scholar in residence, and we had Yehuda Kurtzer and Mohammed, thank you, sharing their incredible partnership in the program that they're doing. And that was even before everything in the world that's happened, the idea that Jews and Muslims are working so closely together, particularly in Israel, to advance understanding and reconciliation and rapport was really, really critical. But more broadly, particularly in light of everything that's happened in the world over the last month or so, opportunities to share with other organizations that align with progressive and pluralistic values and ideals and are working hard to realize those ideals. That's something that that our community, particularly here at Temple to Hirsch Sinai, aspires to do. And we are so fortunate to have so many different organizations nationally and internationally that reflect those values as well. And so it is without further ado that I would like to introduce Elaine, who will introduce our speaker. But thank you so much for sharing this moment with us.
Hi, my name is Elaine Sulkin, and I'm just thrilled that we're all together, gathered to hear Micah Goodman. It's a big treat for all of us. I'm especially inspired by the young people who have come to join us, and I'm welcoming you on behalf of the other board members sitting in the room, Jackie Bailey and my husband, Bobby. So glad you're here. Rabbi, thank you. And, you know, I think most people do know enough about the Hartman Institute, but what I encourage you to do is two things. One is, last night I was just looking on the website, and just if you're in need of some inspiration, jump on there and look at the Heart Talks. It's called Heart Talks, like TED Talks. And there is some incredibly audacious, meaningful content that is TED Talk style, that is inspiring. And these are not the Heart Talks, but I'm just read through some of the topics. Alana Stein, who is an amazing scholar, her article, Some of My Best Friends Are Racist. Yehuda Kurtzer, the president of North America Hartman, An Urgent Need for Ambivalence. Daniel's most recent post, The Politics of But. And you will be inspired by seeing what kind of thought leadership is on the site, and you can watch video. The other thing is, one day I hope everybody in the room will join Bobby and I for what we call Camp Hartman, which is a week of absolutely nourishing your heart, mind, and soul with scholars like Micah Goodman. So I hope that you'll consider that. And then the only other thing that I want to highlight, because I think it is so incredibly inspiring and it really speaks to the leadership at Hartman, I'm talking about Danielle on down, which is taking something like the conflict and creating the Muslim Leadership Initiative, which is co-directed by, many of you have heard Yossi Klein Halevi, the author of Like Dreamers, who is, you know, a great friend of Israel and a scholar at Hartman, along with his co-director, Imam Abdullah Antepli, who is the imam at Duke University. And when you think about that, young Muslim American leaders from campuses around the country go and study in Jerusalem. Go and study in Jerusalem. about Judaism, about Israel, and about Zionism. It's talk about shattering any glass ceiling of how we can be optimistic. I feel like that's the gift of being associated with Hartman. So thank you. Rabbi Gartenberg, that's who I have to thank for that. Thank you for getting us involved. Anyway, Micah Goodman is here. I'm just going to highlight some of his amazing contributions. His most recent book, Maimonides, and the book that changed Judaism, has been amazingly well received. Other titles, Moses' Final Speech, The Dream of the Kuzari, and The Secrets of the Guide for the Perplexed. Micah Goodman is hugely respected in Israel and far beyond as the director of Ein Prat, the Midrashah, Israel's leading pluralistic Beit Midrash for young adults. I mean, if you want to talk innovation on steroids, you have to visit it when you're in Israel. Dr. Goodman has a doctorate in Jewish thought from Hebrew University of Jerusalem and teaches at his alma mater. And with that, we're so thrilled you're here. Thank you, Micah.
Shalom. So the story of Israel, we could try to tell this incredible story from different angles. Like one way to tell the story of Israel, a classic way, we'll try to speak about the great events that shaped Israel. Israel was shaped by dramatic events, the Six-Day War, the Yom Kippur War, waves of immigration, the Intifada, peace agreements, peace failures. And Israel is the sum of its events. It was shaped by all of its events. That's one way to think about Israel. I'm not going to think about Israel tonight that way. Another way to think about Israel, Israel was shaped by great leaders, by great human beings, like Ben Gurion and Begin, and some rabbis and scholars, and Dayan. Israel is the sum of its leaders. And that's another way to tell the story of Israel. That's not the story I'm going to tell tonight. I want to think about Israel through a different angle. Israel is not only shaped by great leaders and dramatic events. Israel is also shaped by great ideas. And I'm going to try to tell the story of some of those ideas. There was very powerful ideas that shaped the Haredi community in Israel. There's a powerful idea that shaped the secular community in Israel, and there is a powerful idea that shaped the religious community in Israel. By the way, every one of these communities was shaped by a few ideas. I want to speak about a dominant idea that shaped the Haredi community in Israel, the secular community in Israel, and the religious Zionist community in Israel. It's a dominant idea. It's not the only idea. So tonight I'm going to try to tell the story of these three ideas. Where should I start? Let's start with secular Israel, okay? Is that a fair deal? Let's start with secular Israel. Secular Israel and its secular Zionism was an attempt to marry three different ideas. One was nationalism, the second was secularism, and the third was socialism. Socialism was essential to the Zionist project in its very beginning. Now, there was a socialist party, Zionist party called Po'alei Tzion, and there was another party called HaPo'el HaTza'ir, and there were other parties, and they merged after World War I. Many of them merged to a party called Achdut HaAvodah, which merged with other parties later on, other socialist parties, to create Mifleget Po'alei Eretz Yisrael, the party of the workers of Israel, called Mapai, which will turn into a Labor Party, which will be led by David Ben Gurion, which will take over the Zionist movement in the early 1930s and will lead Zionism for 4 decades until it will be overthrown by Menachem Begin in 1977. And what in Israel is considered the Mahapach, the turning point in Israeli history. Now, this attempt to put three ideas together. I want to think about this attempt not politically, not sociologically, but philosophically, from the point of view of ideas. How does this work? Well, there's a very intimate relationship between secularism and socialism and Zionism, the way it was put together by its great thinkers, like Borochov at the beginning and Berel Katzanelistan later on. And this is, I think, how it works. Secularism has a lot to do with creating a new relationship between the Jew and his or her past. As Micha Yosef Berdichevsky put it, secular Zionism is the rebellion of the Jew, the Jew rebelling against his own past. Berdichevsky says we are owned by our past, we are controlled by our past. And we have to liberate ourselves from the tyranny of our past. We're not controlled by our past anymore. Ivrim anachnu ve'et libenu na'avod. We are Hebrews. And we have only one authority, and that is our hearts. Et libenu na'avod. We will only obey ourselves. The authority is not in the past, it's in the present. It's on the hands of rabbi scholars or ancient books. We are our own authority. We're liberating ourselves from the control of our past. That's a passionate idea. Zionism is an attempt to liberate the Jew not only from the control of non-Jews, but also from the control of Judaism. In that sense, it's a double revolution. We will not be controlled by anyone that's not a Jew, but we'll also not be controlled by traditional Judaism. The weakness of secularism is that it's defined by a negation of something. Secularism tells you, for the most part, what your identity is not about. And not what it is about. And to fulfill that gap, that's where socialism comes in. So the way they understood, and this is a very exciting vision, the way they understood is that in Israel, we will succeed to create an exemplary society founded on equality and solidarity and with no hierarchy. And this will be so successful that will inspire other countries to walk this way, other nations to imitate our model. This is how it's going to work. First of all, we have to create an exemplary society in Israel. This is how it's going to work. We're going to start with very small communities that'll be living at very high standards of solidarity and equality. And they're going to be so successful and so inspirational that everyone else in Israel is going to try to imitate them. Because real change doesn't come from persuasion, doesn't come from somebody coming and preaching and people being persuaded and therefore changing. That's not how real change happens. Real change doesn't happen from persuasion, it happens from imitation. You see something that's working, something that looks great, you're not persuaded by it, you want to by that thing. You want to be that thing. You remember the famous scene from When Harry Met Sally, right? Yeah, you all know the famous scene. And the important line in that scene in the restaurant, after someone was having a good time, so remember so I want what she's having. You see, that's what socialist Zionism was about. We want what they're having. And by the way, so these small communities that were supposed to create an exemplary, great societies were called kibbutzim. And this was the model. They'll live socialism. They'll be inspiring We'll all want what they're having. We'll all become socialists. As a result, all of Israel will be socialists. And then the countries around the world will look at Israel, and what will they say? Yeah, we want what they're having. We want that. And as a result, the whole world will change. A few Jews in Dgania, a kibbutz, and in Ein Charod will change Israel. Israel will change the world. By the way, according to this vision, if you're living in Ein Charod in the 1920s, where are you living? You're the avant-garde of history. What is an avant-garde? It's different than a prophet. Prophet is a person that could see the future. An avant-garde doesn't see the future. An avant-garde, in his mind, the avant-garde is the future. This is how everyone else is going to live in the future. I'm just living this way before anyone else. Oh, an avant-garde believes one more thing. The fact that I'm living this way before everyone else, that is promoting the future. That is showing the way for everyone else. So that means if you're going to visit Ein Charod, the kibbutz in Emek Israel, in 1925, a little bit after it was founded, to meet someone like Yosef Bussel or Yitzchak Tabenki, some of the leaders the founders of socialist Zionism. You walk into a kibbutz. Where did you just land? You went to visit the future. The future is not about robots. It's about solidarity. It's about equality. You went to visit the future. So let's put these pieces together. What's the relationship between secularism and socialism? Well, secularism is about my relationship to my past, and socialism is about my future. Secularism is me rebelling against the past, and socialism is my exciting vision for the future. Secularism is about who I am not, and socialism is about who I am. And these identities complete each other. Oh, and by the way, socialism also completes Zionism, because Zionism is an attempt of Jews in some way to isolate themselves from humanity, and socialism is our attempt to inspire humanity. So we're not only disconnecting ourselves from the world, we are, through Zionism, we are connecting back to that world through socialism. I think this is an interesting idea. Don't you think? There's only one problem with this idea. The problem was that what happened with socialism in the end? Well, it starts to fail in different places in the world. And in Israel, in the late 70s and 80s, became more and more capitalistic. And eventually what happened to the kibbutzim? Almost all kibbutzim went through certain levels of privatization. And here's what happened. According to the theory, the kibbutz will change Israel and Israel will change the world. But what really happened, the world changed and then Israel changed and then the kibbutz changed. Meaning, instead of it being the leader of the world, it was led by the world. Which means, today when you go to visit a kibbutz, let's say Ein Charod, and it's all privatized. And someone will take you to a tour and show you this is where where we used to eat together. This is the Beit Yeladim. You know the Beit Yeladim, this is where all the children used to sleep because families are not socialistic enough. You have to separate. Yeah, and you go and everyone is fascinated. Because it's a nostalgic tour. Because today when you go to visit a kibbutz, you're going to visit the past. That's nostalgia. It used to be avant-garde, now it's nostalgia. You used to go visit the future, now you're going to visit the past. So this vision was exciting and it collapsed. But here's the thing, and here's my argument. When socialism started to crumble, so secular Zionism was in trouble. Because socialism gave meaning to secular Zionism. It meant it's not only a negative identity, it's a positive identity. It's not like rebelling against the past, it's a vision for the future. It's not only isolating yourself from the world, it's inspiring that world. What's left from Zionism and secularism without socialism? You're just disconnecting yourself from the world? Rebelling against the past? Nothing positive? Nothing exciting? That's it? That's it. Actually, ideas have interesting history. I think there's one more phase. Right when socialism was starting to lose its power, in the 70s, a new idea was born that in a very deep sense replaced socialism as the guiding idea of secular Israel. And that idea was the idea of peace. You see, in 1978, in 1977, late 1977, 1978, the Egyptians surprised Israel. See, the Egyptians surprised Israel twice. They surprised Israel in 1973. They surprised Israel with war. And then they surprised Israel again. Just this time they surprised Israel with peace. When Anwar Sadat came to Jerusalem, Israelis were... Some of you remember that, right? That was astonishing. I was 4, so I don't think I was that amazed. But it was, Anita Shapira, the Israeli historian, describes it as a moment where Israelis were pinching themselves. They couldn't believe they're not in a dream. That the leader of the largest Arab country, our greatest enemy, is coming because they couldn't believe it. We were told that the basic condition of Israel is to be with war with its neighbors. And maybe history could be different. And there was negotiations between Israel and Egypt. And negotiations got bumpy. And Begin said, maybe peace is not possible now. And then the peace movement was born. Peace now. Then it was born. And the idea of peace became a great vision, an exciting vision, almost a messianic vision. Almost a messianic vision. And in a very deep sense, it replaced socialism as a great, exciting vision for the future. Instead of solidarity between workers, a solidarity between nations. And a new Middle East. The problem is that the idea of peace is an idea that many Israelis stopped believing in. Especially after, many Israelis don't believe in peace today because, the Middle East. And as a result, when the idea of peace started to lose its power, there is no idea bigger than life that's giving meaning to life. And secular Israel started to enter a very serious crisis. Okay, remember Monty Python? So there's follow Monty Python? So there's that line. And now for something completely different. So I want to move to something completely different. I want to now examine and follow and listen to a different idea. The idea of the messianic version of religious Zionism. And one of the most important articulators of this idea is a rabbi, a thinker called the Rav Tzvi Yehuda. Rav Tzvi Yehuda. He is the son of one of the greatest philosophers of the 20th century, the Rav Avraham Yitzchak HaKohen Kook. His son, Rav Tzvi Yehuda Kook, he created the vision for the settler movement, for Gush Emunim, for a very exciting version of religious Zionism. But to understand this, I want to go a little bit backwards and to think about religious Zionism. Religious Zionism, religious Zionists, for 70 years were suffering from I'm trying to say this in English, inferiority complex. Did I say correctly? Yeah. What? Inferiority. By the way, I'm Israeli. You can't always hear in my accent, but I'm Israeli. I was born in Israel, in Jerusalem. I was raised in Israel. I was never outside of Israel for more than 2-3 weeks. How's my accent? I was working up, polishing my American accent ever since I finished the army. When I was in high school, I used to speak English like this, very much like this, because my mother was American, and I was embarrassed from her because I was a teenager. So I used to I shouldn't be sharing all my issues in front of camera. I always forget there's a camera in the room. So where was I? The inferiority complex. I get it? Okay, so here's the problem. Religious Zionists always felt like they're not the real thing. You see, because they were religious and they were Zionists. And secular Israelis, they were real Israelis. They were the real Sabarim. They were hardcore. They were authentic Zionism. And religious Zionists, you always used to feel like not real, not authentic, not completely Israeli, a little bit nerdy next to them. They were the real thing. Because the religious component was weakening their Israeliness. There was something galuti, something exilic about their Zionism because they carried, milchiks, fleishiks, the whole halachic burden with them. When they looked at the Haredi Israelis, they felt like they were truly religious. They were authentically religious. They felt they're not. So the Haredi made them feel like they're not really religious. The secular used to make them feel like they're not really Zionists. They were like somewhere, in the middle, not authentic, not passionate, not real. And for 70 years, they were carrying this complex. Yosef Burg, one of the leaders of the political leaders of religious Zionism, the father of Burg, he was asked once, "Ma atem yoter, tzionut o datit?" What are you more, religious or Zionist? And he answered like with a Yiddish accent, "Anachnu hamakaf." We are the hyphen. That's all we are. A very Avi Ravitsky, one of my teachers, used to say that for many years people thought that if Zionism is a train, so Mapai, Labor Party, was the engine. And religious Zionism is Mashgiach HaKashrut. It's the kosher supervisor of the train. It was a very uncharismatic identity, religious Zionism. Till the 70s. In the 70s, something happens. As a result of the Six-Day War and other great dramatic events that were happening, suddenly more and more Israelis felt like Zionism is much more than it seems. If in 6 days the Israeli army defeats 3 armies, if in 6 days it more than triples its size, if in 6 days it completely transformed Jewish history, there was a sense in the moments after the Six-Day War that Jewish history we're in the most dramatic moment in Jewish history ever since Exodus. And not only are these moments extremely dramatic, and they were not supposed to happen, the prophets of Israel saw them happening. Isaiah, Jeremiah, Amos. They had a vision. They saw this happening. They knew it was going to happen, and they wrote it down thousands of years ago. And if you compare ancient prophecies to contemporary reality, you realize that what was written in ancient verses in the Bible are today current events in Israel. The Bible is back, and the ancient verses are a reality. And religious Zionism started changing, started saying, and this is what the Rav Tzvi Yehuda started to put together. Something like this. If the prophets were speaking of the different Jews from all over the world returning to Israel in critical masses, that's happening. If the Bible was speaking of an expansion of Jewish sovereignty over Israel, that's how he interpreted it. This is happening. If the Bible is speaking about the return of the children of Israel to the mountains of Samaria and Jerusalem and Judea, this is happening. If the Bibles are speaking of settlements in Judea and Samaria, this is happening. So Rav Tzvi Yehuda said, so guess what? If all the prophecies till now are happening, what does that mean? That also the next prophecies are going to happen. And we're in the middle of redemption. This is it. It's not the beginning of redemption, Rav Tzvi Yehuda used to say. It's the middle of redemption. Emtsaita de geula. It's the middle of redemption. Suddenly, religious Zionists have a new identity. Because the best, it seems like, post-Six-Day War, that the best interpretation to Zionism is not socialism, it's Messianism. It seems like that Zionism is not leading the world to a solidarity of workers. Zionism is a fulfillment of ancient prophecies, and it's leading the world to its religious redemption. That's the larger narrative giving meaning to Zionism. And so it turns out religious Zionists, they were the ones who got it right to begin with. And now look at us. We're more Zionistic than secular Israelis because their Zionism is not passionate Zionism, because now we have a messianic passion attached to our Zionism. We're more Zionists than secular Israelis. Oh, and guess what? We're more religious than Haredi Israelis. Because how can you be religious if you're denying God's intervention in history? We're more religious than the Haredim. We're more Zionist than secular. We're the real thing. And now, suddenly, 70 years later, religious Zionists don't feel like they're less Israeli or less religious. They feel like they're more Israeli. They're more religious. They're the real thing. Exciting moment. But something happened. By the way, this is also an explanation for some of the settlements. This is an insight by Ari Shavit. It's okay, I can quote Ari Shavit. That in the West Bank in Samaria, religious Zionists for the first time felt like they are avant-gardes. You see, the classic narrative was that secular socialism, they went to Dgania, they built kibbutzim, they went to Ein-Harod, they built kibbutzim, they went to Nahalal, they built moshavim, they are the avant-gardes, and everybody went after them. So in 1975, in Sebastia, in the first settlement in Samaria, they said, you know what? We're going to build a settlement in Samaria, and we believe that later on, everyone is going to come after us. We're not being led by secular Zionism. From now on, we are going to lead everyone else, including secular Zionism. Sebastia Gush Emunim was the moment of liberation of religious Zionism. They liberated themselves from Mapai, from the control of of Zionism. But there's a problem in the theory. What's the problem? The problem is, it's a theory that interprets the past and could see the future. And the future is that all of Israel, all the Israelis, will realize the importance of these settlements. And they'll realize that the root of all these settlements is our connection to the Torah. And because of these settlements, they'll return to the Torah, and it will lead to redemption, to Mashiach. Here's what's not supposed to happen according to this theory. Settlements are supposed to lead to the end of secularism. That was the vision of Gush Emunim, as written in 1975. Here's what's not supposed to be. Settlements are supposed to lead to the end of secularism, and not secularism to lead to the end of settlements. Which is what happened when and where? In 2005, the evacuation of settlements from the Gaza Strip in northern Samaria. These were events that, theologically speaking, could not happen. And therefore, they thought, are not going to happen. So according to the theory, this can't happen. And as a result, Messianic religious Zionists that were fighting against the evacuation of Jews from Gaza, from settlements, they weren't saying you shouldn't evacuate settlements. That's not what they were saying. They were saying something more interesting. You know what they were saying? They weren't saying, Asur shetiyeh atnatkut. There shouldn't be a disengagement. They said, Lo tiyeh atnatkut. It's not going to happen. And in rallies, they would say again and again, it's not hayo lo tiyeh. It's not going to happen. They believed it won't happen because it can't happen. Because theologically it can't happen. So it won't happen. But guess what? It happened. And it turns out that settlements did not transform secularism, but secular identity uprooted settlements. And majority of Israelis want to uproot more settlements. You see, uprooting of settlements is for religious Zionism what privatization of the kibbutz is for socialist Zionism. It's an ideological blow. It's not supposed to happen. The kibbutz was supposed to change the world, not be changed by the world. The settlement was supposed to be an avant-garde, change the world, not be changed by the world. And now for something completely different. I want to enter, in a nutshell, a very powerful idea guiding Haredi Israel. And that's the idea, Haredi Israel, first of all, there's many ideas, but there's a very dominant idea, and it's about the power of studying Torah. Studying Torah is much more than accumulating knowledge about the Torah. It's much more than that. The 19th century, an important book was written called Nefesh HaChaim, The Soul of Life, by a scholar, a very important scholar, called Rabbi Chaim Mivolozhin. And in this book, he describes what happens when you study Torah. And he makes a few distinctions. Here are two of them. One is when you study Torah and your mind is involved in the structure of the Talmud and understanding the discussion, the Talmudic discussion, so your mind is filled with Torah and there's no room in your mind for anything that's not Torah. So what's the best way to deal with modernity, with modern values, modern temptation, feminism, liberalism, consumerism, all the problems and threats of modernity and Western civilization? How can I guard myself from Western temptation? You study Torah. The Torah is going to protect you. It's going to guard your minds. People ask, how in modern times, how can you study Torah all day long? Because it's modern times, you have to study Torah all day long. That's the reason. There is a metaphor that Charedim use that modern times is like so crazy and so threatening. It's like the Mabud, it's like a flood. Everything is destroyed. All values are destroyed. It's like a flood. But even at the time of the flood, there was Noah's Ark. You know what Noah's Ark is? It's the yeshiva world. That's where you sit and you're protected from the flood. You're protected from all the threats. So Torah protects you from the world. It isolates you from the world. Now that's an interesting take because, by the way, according to other parts in that Torah, the role of Torah is to connect you to the world. Progressive Judaism would say, what the Torah does, it inspires me to repair the world. Tikkun olam. So we have a Judaism that the Torah is about connecting you to the world, and we have a Judaism that the Torah is about protecting me from that world. Yes, but I just sold Rabbi Chaim Volozhin short, because there is another distinction in the foundation of Haredi theology, is that it's a whole Kabbalistic metaphysics, is that in some way the Torah is organically connected to the divine world. And nothing in this world is organically connected to the divine world like Torah. And you know what happened? Now, it's a metaphysics I want to share just very quickly. Everything you see in this world is a reflection of the divine world. It's all a reflection of the divine world. And the Torah is also connected to the divine world. So follow me here. By studying Torah, I'm in some way, I know this sounds a little bit weird, I'm in some way, in some symbolic, metaphoric way, curing the divine world. Now, when I'm curing the divine world, what am I effectively curing? The entire world that's a reflection of the divine world. Therefore, by studying Torah, what am I doing? I'm curing the world. Did you follow me? So I want to conclude. The same act that separates me from the world is the act that's curing that world. So what's the most productive thing we can do? Study Torah all day long. So the more the world gets, according to my Haredi values, distorted, the more on the one hand I have to isolate myself from it, and the other hand I have to cure it. And there's one action that does both: studying Torah. Now, where is this idea reflected in Israel? In Israel, for the first time in Jewish history, you have an entire community that has an aspiration to study Torah all day long. See, in the past, there were communities that had aspiration to enable a part of the community, the elite of the community, to study Torah. Give them scholarships, don't work. The elites, one person out of 100, could study Torah all day long. A community enables the study of Torah. But in Israel, for the first time in Jewish history, you don't have a community that enables people to study Torah, but a community where the entire community aspires to study Torah. That's something new. What's the roots of this idea? Well, the more the world is dangerous, you have to protect yourself. And so a study of Torah is a very, very powerful idea. There's only one problem. Today, this idea is not working. It's not working for many reasons. Here are a few. One, the attempt to isolate yourself from the world is not working because of something very dramatic that happened to all of us the past decade. And that is internet, smartphones. You know how many, according to some research, you know how many Haredim have access to internet? At least 40%. You know what that means? That almost half of Haredi population has access to internet. That means that the attempt to isolate yourself from society failed, and it failed forever. More and more Charedim want to leave the yeshiva world and to join the workforce. And they realize in order to leave the yeshiva world and join the workforce, so you also have to have the skills to do it, and there's pressure to get those skills. So something very large is changing. But you know what that means? This redemptive idea of Torah, when we implement it, it seems like today it's not working. I want to put this together. The collapse of the idea of socialism puts secular Zionism in a crisis of ideas. Religious Zionism, that more and more is not believing in the messianic narrative, is in a crisis of idea. Haredi Israel, that its most important ideas are collapsing, is facing a crisis of ideas. And what's interesting, it's all happening more or less at the same time. There was I have a friend that is an Israeli entrepreneur. He was very successful as an entrepreneur. Statistically speaking, if you have a startup, what are your chances of succeeding? You know what the chances are? 1 to 10. 1 out of 10 succeeds. But you interview an entrepreneur, you always think, 80%. Yeah. There's always a gap between, there's an Israeli called Dan Ariely, a scholar that examined this gap. Because entrepreneurs are always more optimistic than their real chances, and it's because of that irrational optimism is that they're entrepreneurs in the first place. So I have a friend that tried 7 times and succeeded 5 times. He's either very smart or very, very lucky. And that result, he became like a guru, like young entrepreneurs like to come and take it. And I once heard him talk to young entrepreneurs in Israel, in startup Israel. And he gave this talk. I was present in the talk, and he gave this great story of I don't know if it's a true story, he made it up, but it's a great story about some reporters from the BBC go to a construction site. And they see all these workers using like hammers and hitting a stone with it. I guess, they're building the curving the rock. And they're asking the first person, "What are you doing?" They're interviewing 3 people. The first person, "What are you doing?" And he says, I'm just hitting a rock. That's what I'm doing. I'm hitting a rock. Okay, they ask the second person, "What are you doing?" And he says, "I'm carving a building block." Now he's doing the same action. They asked the third person, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm building a house." All 3 are doing the same action, but they're living in a different narrative. For the first, his narrative is shrinking into his action. His narrative is his action. He's hitting a rock. The second is curving a building block, but the third is building a house. So what he likes to say is you're as big as your narrative. The narrative that's larger than your action is giving meaning to your action. Socialism was larger than Zionism, and it gave meaning to Zionism. Messianism was larger than religious Zionism, and it gave meaning to religious Zionism. The idea of Torah was larger than Haredi life, and it gave meaning to Haredi life. But what happens when the idea of Torah doesn't work anymore? And Messianic Zionism doesn't work anymore? And socialism doesn't work anymore? What happens then? When you lose the narrative that's bigger than life, that gives meaning to life. Then what are you? You're just a person, knocking, hitting a rock. You're just your actions. If you go interview Tabenkin in the 20s when they were fighting swamps in Emek Israel, and you ask him, "What are you doing?" He wouldn't say, "We're fighting swamps." He'd say, "We're creating a socialistic world." It's about humanity. If you would ask If you ask someone with a trailer on a hill in Samaria, he's not in a trailer in the hill of Samaria. He is bringing the Mashiach. If you're interviewing someone in a yeshiva in Mea Shearim, he's not studying Talmud. He is repairing the world. There's a narrative bigger than his action that's filling his action with adrenaline. What happens when these narratives are cracked? What happens now? My talk tonight is about Israel in crisis, not a crisis because of war, not a crisis of leadership, a crisis of dreams, a crisis of ideas. But I'm very excited about this crisis. I'm very excited about this crisis. Because the fact that these ideas are collapsing simultaneously also means that Israelis are beginning to listen. I'm speaking specifically about younger Israelis, and I see this every day. Israelis in their 20s that it feels natural to them to be in a post-ideological Israel. They're starting to listen. You know why they're starting to listen to each other? Because that's what happens when ideas collapse. You lose the illusion of certainty. And you start asking, hey, what is it that you think? And I think this is something I wanted to share, everything that's going on in America. And with that, I'd like to open this up for questions. I want to share two things. I'll share one thing, and then maybe I'll find a way through your questions to say the second one. The fact that ideologies are in some way losing their energy doesn't mean Israelis are losing their energy. Some are, but mainstream Israel isn't. Let me share with you two images I have. One, summer 2014. Remember what happened in summer 2014 in Israel? So I belong to a reserve unit where we were not recruited for the war, but we have a WhatsApp group of all the soldiers in the reserve unit. And the WhatsApp group, the entire war, everyone was asking, when are they recruiting us? When are they recruiting us? And I'm like, why are you asking? When are they recruiting us? And they all somehow felt they wanted to volunteer. They wanted to be a part. They wanted to protect residents in the south that are attacked by Hamas. They wanted to be involved. Now that is just an example of a large spirit of volunteerism we had throughout Israel, where people were volunteering in different places to go down to Sderot, to buy their things for Shabbat from Sderot, volunteering with reserves. My wife belonged to like a group of other wives that were making Shabbat meals for other families that their husband went to Miluim. There was just one thing. And the spirit of volunteerism was so large. And you ask yourself, hey, aren't ideologies behind us? Didn't the ideals collapse? And I think a good way to think about Israel today, Israel is very idealistic. And here's my best way of understanding Israel. Israel lost its ideas, and it's very idealistic. Does that make sense? Life doesn't always make sense, by the way. Coherence is overrated. I'm serious, it's messy. But Israelis have a tendency to be Israelis are idealistic with idealist passion, but don't have clear ideologies. Now that asymmetry between lack of clear ideologies and yet very passionate idealism, that asymmetry, I think, articulates many, many Israelis today. In summer, a good moment to notice that is summer 2011. Summer 2011, thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of Israelis leave their homes, move to tents, to protest, to rally for a better Israel. Israel founded on justice and solidarity. But the thing was, now I once read a book, you know those books you buy in airports? That tell you how in 4 moves you make a lot of money and in 3 moves you become a great leader. You know those books? So I like to read them. I shouldn't be have all these confessions in front of the camera. I hope you'll do the... So I once said there that in order to rally a crowd and create a lot of passion for the crowd, you have to have a clear message. Well, I was thinking about that when I was thinking about summer 2011 in Israel. Because there was a lot of passion on the one hand, but no clarity on the other hand. The asymmetry between the passion and the clarity was a very unique Israeli protest. You know, they were saying, Ha'am, Doresh, Tzedek Chevrati. Israel is the nation, the people are demanding social justice. But what was social justice about? Was it about the prices of housing? Some people said. The prices of cottage cheese? Others said. Settlements? Others said. Ultra-Orthodox joining the army? Others said. It was about so many things, and it was about education. Others said. What was it about? It was all this passion, and almost no. Somebody said in Haaretz that it was Ha'am, Doresh, Kol Minei Dvarim. The people are demanding all kinds of things. But I think that was exactly this is it. That captures a moment. That captures the spirit of a moment where there's a lot of idealism, a lot of passionate idealism, and not a lot of clarity to ideas. And I think that asymmetry is a great opportunity. Because Israelis didn't lose the idealism when ideas collapsed. They're still idealistic, no real clear ideas. And this is why this is a very important moment in the history of ideas in Israel. Because this generation of Israelis is not going to inherit the ideas of their parents and grandparents. They're going to create new ones. And that's why the Israeli conversation is so interesting today. Thank you. Yes. You see, very interesting, the whole startup scene. There are more Israeli startups in NASDAQ than all of Europe together. And there's an entrepreneurial spirit in Israel, and Israelis are very proud of that. And I know something else, that there's tourism to Israel, new form of tourism today. People from all over the world coming to Israel trying to learn the secret sauce. How do you create an environment that cultivates an entrepreneurial society, so many startups? And what is the secret sauce? What are Israelis good at? They're not good at math. They're not. Not computer. Like, what is it about? So there's all these theories. Some of you definitely read Startup Nation, right? Trying to answer this question is about the arm. What is it about? And people from all over the world are coming, from India, from China. I know, sometimes I speak to these groups, and they all want to know, what is Israel about? And I was thinking, oh my God, this is interesting. Because it used to be that people all over the world used to come to volunteer in kibbutzim. They want to be witness to Israeli socialism. They want to learn the secret sauce. And Israelis were fascinated by the fact that there were volunteers in every kibbutz from all over the world. People want to see, what does it mean, people's attempt to overcome their ego and to live in equality and solidarity. And now people will come to visit startups and see how people express their ego and their creativity, and she asks herself, wow, it used to be that Israel was known for its socialism, and now it's known for its capitalism. And it used to be that Israel was inspiring because of its socialism, and now it's inspiring for its capitalism. I think that shift, in some sense, tells a story. That's another way to tell the story of Israel. Yes. Oh, I always forget the numbers. Roughly, I think there's less than 1 million Ultra-Orthodox, and a little bit less than that religious Zionists. And it depends how you count secular Israelis. Depends how you count them. Let's say roughly 1 million. Because if I don't count, there's few other groups. Depends how you count them. When I say secular Israelis, I mean a very specific group, the ones that used to be socialists and became capitalists. The ones that see themselves as the founders of Israel, and now they feel like Israel is taken away from them. So maybe roughly less than 1 million, okay? Give or take 500,000, okay? No, but there is other, like for example, the Russian immigration. They're secular, but they're not part of that group. They don't see themselves as founders. They don't have a nostalgia to socialism. They actually have an allergic reaction to socialism. So it's a different Israel. And then there's another group of Israelis that come from Muslim countries, the Mizrahim, which is a very interesting group. I hope somebody will ask me about them. Yes. Yeah. Oh, thank you. I'm so happy you asked. So what's it? The Mizrahim have a narrative that they came in the 50s and the 60s, and they were deprived from many of the privileges, and their unique identity was invisible to European Israelis. Ultra-Orthodox Israelis tried to make them ultra-Orthodox, meaning a European version of Judaism. Secular Israelis tried to make them secular socialists, meaning a European version of Judaism. And no one saw them. Instead of transforming them, no one tried to be somehow inspired by what they had to offer. But the interesting thing is that today, more and more Israelis are asking the opposite question. Instead of trying to change them, maybe we could change in light of their model. And they're offering something very interesting. They're offering what many consider a healthy relationship to our past. What is a healthy relationship? Which is called in Israel Masorti, which is not conservative. Masorti. This is how an Israeli thinker would try to articulate their impulse, called Meir Buzaglo understands it. If Orthodox Israelis feel like they have to obey the past, and secular Israelis feel like they have to liberate themselves from the past, Masorti is not about obeying and not about rebelling. Because they don't see the past as authority. In front of authority, either you obey it or you rebel against it. But if the past is not authority to begin with, what if it's a warm family? The dominant category that Buzagler argues, through it we have to understand Masorti, is not of obedience, but of loyalty. Let's think about it this way. Not how I'm surrendering to the authority of the past, but how loyal I am to it. That would create a different Judaism. Think of, I was reading now a book about somebody in the way Freud imagined the father figure, and a very authoritative father. Next to that father, you're afraid, and you want to satisfy that father figure. I'm reading that, I'm thinking, my girls are not really, they should read this. what am I doing wrong? So I'm imagining, traditionally speaking, the father has authority, but the grandfather is not authority. What is the grandfather? What? Wise, warmth. You go to your father for instructions. You go to your grandfather for advice. Something else. What happens if our tradition stops being the authoritative father and it becomes the wise grandfather? What happens if our tradition is not authority but inspiration? Not instructions but great guidance and advice. That would be masolti. Let's think of that as the warm grandfather, not the authoritative father. It's not the all or nothing game. It's not either I'm liberated from it or I'm controlled by it. So they're offering a very interesting model of how to be an Israeli that I find many young Israelis are trying to adopt. So if the 50s, Europeans were trying to control them, now some of them want to be changed according to their model, but there is something else going on. I think Mizrahi Israelis are not only offer us a way to bridge the gap between different identities in Israel, they also might be extremely helpful in dealing with the other conflict we have, the conflict with the Palestinians. See, Israelis many times buy the American narrative, and it's also a Jewish narrative, that Judaism is a part of a larger narrative. Judaism is a part of the Judeo-Christian tradition. Now that narrative is extremely helpful for American Jews. And as Jonathan Sarna wrote after World War II, that narrative of Judeo-Christian tradition meant that Jews are a part of the narrative. A big part of the narrative, like 50% of the narrative. That's not bad for 2% of the population. That's a good piece of the narrative. We're a part, so that's like your part. You're not in exile in America. You are, because that's a great, and Jonathan Sarna writes, that's great. But what happens when us Israelis, when we also see ourselves as a part of the Judeo-Christian tradition? Well, here's what happens. Once we have that narrative, that separates us from Muslims. We might be a part of Western civilization, but that sets us apart from the Middle East. Now try to imagine, please, I know this might be hard to, but try to imagine the following narrative. What if in Israel we start thinking of ourselves? I'm saying, what if? Okay, let's, just for the sake of conversation. What if we start imagining ourselves as a part of a Judeo-Muslim tradition? Isn't that interesting? And that would mean that the larger narrative we belong to doesn't set us apart of the Middle East, it makes us a part of the Middle East. That would mean, and by the way, that might not be such a stretch. Theologically speaking, a real argument could be made that Judaism is much more similar to Islam than it is to Christianity. You know who would agree? Maimonides. You know who else? Anyone that listens to Hebrew and Arabic might notice that it's a little bit more similar than Hebrew and Latin. And especially, and most importantly, we both have the same understanding of what religion is about. It's not about what you think and what you believe. It's mainly about what you do. They have Sharia, we have Halacha. Sharia, by the way, means a road. Halacha means you walk on, on a road. What would that mean? So some of my students participated in something very interesting a few weeks ago. You know where Gay Ben Hinnom is? A place in Jerusalem. There was an event called Mekudeshet. And what they did there, what they did was they played sacred music. That's an attempt to say they prayed together, but without saying that they prayed together. Sacred music. Religious people. Part were Orthodox rabbis, which are Mizrahi, and some were Muslims One of them, dominant Muslims. Some of them are muazzin, meaning they're like chazanim, yes, in mosques. And why could they play? And why could they do that? Because Jews from Muslim civilization, yeah, and Muslims living in Israel have. So, is there room here for a new understanding through a new narrative? Very possible. What I'm saying is that in Israel, because we're such a European identity, European identities are creating unhealthy relationships between Israelis and their past, and also maybe unhealthy relationships between Israel and the Middle East. So maybe I was describing many ideas here, and where can a new idea come from? And here's maybe a good point to try to offer a thought. Maybe the crisis of ideas is a crisis of European ideas. Socialism was a European idea. Religious Zionism is very Hegelian. It's very European. The idea of Torah, that's a very Eastern European idea. That's where there's a crisis. Where might there be new inspiration for new ideas and new opportunity? From Jews coming from the Middle East. They have a different understanding of Judaism and also a different understanding of the broader identity we might belong to. Does that make sense to you guys? Here in Seattle? Okay, that was interesting. Thank you. Thank you. I thought I was walking on a limb. Thank you. Thank you. Ready, one last question? Go for it. Okay. I'll try. But how about, because I have to do this in 5 minutes, I won't try to pave the way there. I'll just say, where can we go, okay? But just so you know, I know the way. No, just joking. That's why, there's no more time, so I could, But this is, but I think Zionism, maybe Zionism not about socialism, not about messianism, and not about, maybe Zionism is about Judaism. I'll try to explain what I mean. Judaism in ancient times changed the world. Judaism changed the world. Judaism brought to the world a few ideas that changed the world. One idea was monotheism. This is an idea that shaped the way we experience the world, the way humanity experiences the world. Another idea is Shabbat. I'll speak more broader, the Jewish understanding of time and of future changed the world. A third idea was power, the idea that you should not admire power. The ancient world used to believe that power is divine, therefore powerful people are divine. In the Tanakh and the Torah, it's very clear that the Torah does not admire power. It criticizes power. It's an idea we all take for granted. It's an idea that comes from the Bible. These are great. These are, I would say, Judaism offered the world three ideas that changed the world. I'm speaking in very broad strokes here, right? In very broad strokes here. Maybe if I'll come again, I'll speak the biography of these three ideas. God, time, and power. And these three ideas changed the world. The notion that, so Shabbat became universal. That's a tremendous, God became universal. Monotheism. People today in Western civilization, if they don't believe in God, the God they don't believe in is not the God of the sun. It's not the God of the ocean. The God they don't believe in is monotheism. Monotheism became the theology of Western civilization. If you believe in it, it's monotheism. And if you don't believe in it, the God you don't believe in is you're a monotheist atheist. You're not a... And if you're agnostic, you're not agnostic. I'm not sure if the sun God exists. I don't know any... No, you're a monotheist agnostic. So this is an idea that changed the world. Because if you're that kind of an agnostic, you're a whole different agnostic. It's an idea that changed the world. Time, power, God. These are three ideas. Judaism, for many years, Judaism didn't offer any contribution to the world. I shouldn't be speaking in such broad strokes in front of a camera because I just have bad experiences of people taking a line and then I have to explain what I really meant. Okay, I trust you. You'll know what to do with. I'm actually facing now in Israel, somebody wrote something very not nice about something that I said. Maybe after the camera will be closed, So Judaism did not offer any real contribution to civilization for many, many years. See, the last time Judaism created ideas that it shared with humanity was when critical mass Jews lived in Israel, spoke Hebrew, lived sovereign lives. In those conditions, ideas were created that eventually changed the world. But for many years, Jews were scattered around the world. Judaism became something very private. And in some sense, Echad Ha'am was right, that the exile is a privatization of Judaism. And it's true that Jews offer tremendous contribution to civilization, right? We're all proud of, Einstein and Freud and Marx and all the great people that contribute, Oppenheimer, some great things. Yeah, we contribute to the world, and musicians, and Jerry Seinfeld, and Woody Allen. I'm serious. We made the world laugh. We made the world science. We made the world so, wow, Jews, tremendous. Yeah, we like the numbers, right? We're 0.02% of world population, but 20% of Nobel Prize winners. So as individuals, Jews probably offer a contribution to humanity that's way beyond its size. But that's a contribution of Jews, not of Judaism. The question is, can Zionism is an attempt to reconstruct the conditions where Judaism was effective? Where Judaism. Now, my vision for Zionism is, can we build a Judaism in Israel that could be inspiring again? Which means Zionism is, maybe political Zionism is about saving Jews. But inspirational Zionism is about lifting Judaism. And I think and I spoke about Mizrachim, about different ways to get there. But I think Zionism could be about, see, there used to be a disagreement between Echad Ha'am and Herzl, which was exactly about this. Herzl said Zionism is about saving the Jews, and Echad Ha'am was about uplifting Judaism. I think it's about time to move from Herzl to Echad Ha'am. And not because Herzl was wrong. Herzl was right, and because Herzl was so successful. We have such a great sovereign country in Israel. Echad Ha'am thought he was the alternative to Herzl. I want to argue Echad Ha'am is the next stage after Herzl. Thank you.